The following is a student-produced presentation of Brigham Young University, Idaho.
Funding for Latter-day Profiles was provided by the following.
The BYU-Idaho Bookstore, your complete source for all BYU-I merchandise and memorabilia. Online at byuibookstore.com. The BYU-Idaho College of Business and Communication, helping students rise to excellence and distinguish themselves from the crowd.
From the campus of Brigham Young University, Idaho, this is Latter-day Profiles, in-depth conversations with members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hello, I'm Brian Howard. We're at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and we're interviewing today Glenn Beck, who has a nationally syndicated radio talk show as well as a show on CNN Headline News. We'd like to welcome Glenn Beck. Welcome to our campus. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And our live studio audience. Nice to have you.
Nice.
So sneak them in.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of watching your fireside last night, and you've been all over the place, had meetings here in Rexburg with faculty members, community, and all kinds of things. Was it what you expected when you came as far as your reception? What were you expecting?
Well, last time I was here was like 2 years ago, and I remember driving down the highway and just seeing a sign. I don't even remember what it was advertising. It just said, "For all of your potato needs." And I thought to myself, I don't have a lot of potato needs. This time, I'm happy to say it was rejuvenating for me. I got off the plane, and things are just tough right now in the world. And I had worry lines, and I've just had such a great experience here. This is the way life is supposed to be.
Well, we're glad to have you here and glad you're enjoying the reception so far. I know you've told it a lot, and at the fireside you shared some of your conversion story. I know the people who will be watching this, something they're going to be very much interested in. In fact, thanks to YouTube, that's one of my first introductions I had to your conversion story. It made the Mormon rounds for the email. And
I didn't even know that was on YouTube until a missionary came up and said, we had a missionary conference and we watched your conversion story, and I went, what conversion story? So I hear a lot about it from YouTube.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about that? How did you find the church? I know it can be a long story because you elaborated, but tell us about it.
In a nutshell, it was a combination of a couple of things. Watching a friend for a very long time, and as I couldn't weather the storms of life, he and his family, and he had like 400 children, and they could always weather the storms. And no matter what life would throw at them, they were happy. And I wouldn't have storms, and I was miserable. And he never preached to me. He never tried to, I mean, if it was me, I would have held my head underneath the bathwater, but he never did. And he would just say to me, in my darkest times, he would say, there are answers. And I'd say, yeah, but you Mormons are all freaks. And that's where it's shown. And I couldn't, I didn't want to be a Mormon. And when I was at my darkest time, when I thought I was, there was no other place for me to go, I had found a wonderful woman who was she was just so good. I had never met anyone with as much goodness in her. And I kind of asked her to marry me. I said, hypothetically, if someone like me asked someone like you to marry me, what would you say? And she said, hypothetically? And I said, yes. And she said, no. And I said, why? And she said, because we need God. We need a faith. And I had gone to school and done some studying on religion, and it didn't work for me. It was about power and manipulation. And so we went on a church tour. And we went to, we opened up the phone book, started the A's, went down, skipped over Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because, I knew everything I needed to know about those guys. And my friend called me from Salt Lake City and he said, "Are you really doing a church tour?" And I said, yeah, but I'm not going to become a Mormon. And he said, how long have we been friends? And I said, oh, geez, apparently long enough to where now I owe you a trip to your church. And he said, yeah, you owe me one Sunday. And I said, all right, when is it? And he said, 9 to noon. And I said, 9 to noon? 3 hours? Are you crazy? And so he said, just go. And we did. And my daughter, who is our spiritual giant in our family, she was the first to feel it. She was born, she had cerebral palsy, and she's a miracle. And she was walking out, and she said, Dad, can we come back here next Sunday? I just feel all warm inside. And so we did, and it was one Sunday that after going through, a mountain of missionaries. I mean, the first time the missionaries came over, I was reading McConkie's Mormon Doctrine, and I am gonna find the flaw in this religion, because it's got to be there. It's clearly there. And I just went through missionary after missionary, and finally the bishop was coming and making his head hurt. And it was a guy who I had met the first time in the ward, and I had dubbed him the amazing Mr. Plastic Man. And because he was so happy to see me. First time I met him, oh, I just love you so much. And I thought, give it 10 minutes, you'll hate me. And he was teaching an elders quorum, and he talked about the concept of Zion. And he said, brethren, how did we make this happen? How do we really make the Lord's way of living happen? And we had answers, and he looked at us after we were out of answers, and he had tears running down his cheeks, and he said, there's really only one way, and that's if I truly love you and you love me, and I love you and you and you and you and you love me. We may not like each other, we may not know each other, but we truly love each other. That's the secret. And I realized that he was the most genuine man I had ever met. But he was so foreign in today's world. He actually did love me the first time he met me. And I remember sitting there in the pew. I sat there for a long time after class, and I realized I haven't found anything that I disagree with. I'm only being stubborn because I want coffee. And if I can be like him, I don't care if I have to drink chicken blood in the basement, I'll do it. Because I want to do that. I was so tired of hating others and hating myself that I was willing to do whatever it took. And fortunately for me, it doesn't involve chickens. So and it's been miraculous, miraculous.
That leads me to a question I wanted to ask you. What has been perhaps the most difficult transition to becoming a member of the LDS Church? And on the flip side, what's been the thing that's been the easiest to slip into?
Hardest thing. Service. I'm convinced that if home teaching could make me fat, I'd be addicted to it. I don't know why it is that everything that's good for you, you hate, and everything that's bad for you, you love. But I think we should turn this doctrine around, and I think Elders Quorum should stand up every month and say, whatever you do not visit your home teaching families this month. Bad move. Because somehow there's something in me that would all of a sudden be attracted to it. I have the hardest time with service because, believe it or not, in real social situations where it's just me, Glenn, and someone else, I'm socially awkward and have a hard time, and I never think that anyone's going to get anything from me in that, and it's so difficult for me to do. And yet every time I do it, I get into my car and I'm like, why do I hate that so much? I get so many answers, I get so much peace. It really is, service is the hardest thing for me, but the best.
Okay.
The best.
You do 3 hours of live radio every day, and then you turn around and you do an hour of television, CNN headline news every day. I know a little bit about the background of the preparation it takes to do that. Give us some insight into your typical workday.
The good thing is I'm fully 100% audio animatronics. So I'm not actually a living human being, so I can do it. I get up, we're on the road by 6 o'clock. By 7, I'm meeting with the television producers, and I dictate the monologues at that point. I meet with the writers by 7:30, and so we're working ahead and dictate the monologues at that point, and then they go back and, CNN, they care about facts, and so they spend the day checking all the facts. Then at 8 o'clock, I finish the prep with my producers for radio, and finish the writing and the reading of the monologues and everything else for that. We do that. In the breaks, usually we're either cutting things for television, radio, or working with the producers on updates for television. Then I go over right away. I will meet with one of my other, I also publish a magazine. We're currently writing a book. I do stage shows, and we just, much to my business partner's chagrin, I announced last week that we're starting a documentary film unit. And so I squeeze all of that in about an hour and 15 minutes plus lunch. And then we go right to the finish of the monologues, and then right onto the set about 3 o'clock, finished by 5. And then start the process, laying the groundwork for the next show for radio and television, and hopefully in the car by 6 and home with having dinner by 7:30.
Wow.
Giving my kids a bath and trying to make my wife know that she's got the tougher job than I do.
So in your theoretical spare time, what does Glenn Beck do when he's not on the job working hard with the radio and TV shows?
The best thing I did was live in another state from my job. Because I have always been a workaholic, and I have always worked all the time. And I promised my wife that I would not do that with this. And I said, let's live in Manhattan, and she said, let's not. And so we live now in Connecticut, and best thing, because I can completely shut down and just spend it with my family. I've been trying to paint. I haven't painted, quite honestly, I haven't painted anything that I have taken out of a closet since my drinking days. I am terrified to actually try to paint something seriously, because I have this stupid belief that all my talent came from Jack Daniels. And so my wife just got me a new paint set and an easel, along with my sister, and I'm going to start painting again.
What can you tell us about your family life?
It's amazing. I thought I was having a heart attack last year. It was last summer, and I was in bed, and it was, I don't know, about 11 o'clock, and I started having chest pains, and I wake up, and I'm like, oh boy, that's not good. And I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want my wife to freak out, and I'm a typical guy. I could have a tumor the size of a cantaloupe coming out of my neck, and I'd be like, it's nothing. And so I'm in bed, and I'm thinking, boy, I must have had sausage and it got stuck up here someplace. And I figure that if I sit up, it'll make things better, but I didn't want to freak my wife out. So I thought, I'll just sit up in the middle of the night, casually, like I normally do. And I sit up, and she rolls over and she says, what's wrong? And I said, nothing. And she said, what's wrong? I said, nothing. She turns on the light and she looks at me and she says, oh, good Lord, are you having a heart attack? And I said, no, I think it's just a piece of sausage. And So she went and grabbed the computer and, looking up all the symptoms of a heart attack, and I had all of them. And so we were driving to the hospital, and I know this sounds trite, but that night, my son, who I read to every night, and I tucked to bed, he was in his Sam I Am mode, and I used to love to read it to him, and I'd read it to him, and he'd say, one more time, and I'd read it again, one more time, and like all kids, I'd be there in 3 o'clock in the morning. He just didn't want to go to bed. And I'm driving, and I had told Rafi, I said, just 2 times tonight, and I read it twice, and he said, Dad, one more time. I said, no, it's time for bed, and I put him down. As I'm driving to the hospital, I was overcome by the feeling of, why didn't you read that? What was more important? Why didn't you read that story to him one more time? And they are the greatest blessing of my life. I'm so greatly blessed because I have 2 older kids and 2 younger kids. And, Psychiatrist of America, you should rejoice that I raised 2 children because you're going to make a fortune off of the mistakes that I've made with them. And I have another chance now with them. And there's nothing better now. I was a guy who only wanted 1 if push came to shove. And my wife is now saying to me, come on, let's have another. And I find myself in moments that are not alcohol-induced saying, that's a good idea. It's just blessings of having the family around. My best times I've had in my life are now with my kids around the table, just talking.
Tell me about radio. You went to radio, you chose talk radio, of all things. Why? What's the goal of your program? What do you want to do? What are you trying to do with your program?
It's, I don't know. Tell me what you think it is and I'll verify. Radio chose me when I was 8. My mother told me one time when I was growing up about how they used to listen to radio and how Grandpa would turn off all the lights. And they had a radio with a big green eye in the center, and the tube would light up from the back, and how they would just paint pictures, and I couldn't understand it. My 8th birthday, my mom gave me a set of albums. I still have them hanging in my office. The Golden Years of Radio. Now I'm 8 years old, and I'm freak boy in my bedroom listening to Orson Welles and all these great storytellers, and I wanted to be in radio. And so I got into radio. I was 13. And, just stunk on ice for, well, what time is it now? For a long time. And by the time I was 30, I was an alcoholic and had done drugs most of my life, and just had no meaning in life, and knew that I was Alma the Younger and leading people astray with, I know how radio works. I know how to get ratings. I'm a morning show guy, and I'm a program director, and I know how it works, and I know how we were using children to get to the adults, and I couldn't do it anymore. Besides, I had to play Britney Spears, and I was seconds away from hanging myself, and so I was going to get out. My father stopped me, and he said, I was going back to school for theology, and he said, what exactly are you going to do with that big theology degree? And I said, good point, that's why you're the dad and I'm the kid. And he said, you've always been in radio, and you have a gift for it, don't throw it away. And I did talk radio. I was invited to do a fill-in show on WABC in New York, and I did it, and it became very clear I had been in the wrong format my whole life. This is where I needed to be. And nobody would give me a job for a long time because I was a bad guy for much of my career. And couldn't find an agent, couldn't find anything until the day after I was baptized. And the biggest agent in the industry called me. And 3 days later, while I was on the phone with that agent, where he said, I'm going to take you. He took 3 days. He called me. He said, yeah, I hear you're looking for an agent. And I had been looking for 2 years. And I said, yeah. And he said, I hear you're actually, he said, I know your history. He said, I hear you're trying to change. And I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, I'm going to check into you. I'll call you in a couple of days. He called me on a Wednesday. In that conversation, he said, we have to get you in touch with this person. Do you know him? And I said, no. And he said, somehow or another, we have to have you two cross paths. As he said that, call waiting went off. And it was that individual. And he gave me a job. We were a year into it. We went from worst to first, had the highest ratings the station ever had. Year later, Premiere syndicated us. We're now the third most listened to show in America. And I have no idea why.
With that in mind, as far as the state of mass media goes, what's your take on where mass media is today and the need for maybe something like you do in the world of mass media?
I am struck this week here. I was struck by a billboard as I'm driving down the road, and it said, it was for women's clothing, and it was watermarked. It was almost, you could barely see it. It was almost subliminal. And in New York, subliminal advertising, not so subliminal. And that would have said sexy or something like that. And this was watermarked, and it said modest. And I about had a car accident. And I saw that and I thought, oh my gosh. And as I drive around and as I talk to people here, it's refreshing that they don't have a clue how close things are to, I believe, real trouble. It's frustrating because there's a few of us in the media that are trying to ring the warning bells. We're trying to get it out that trouble, real bad trouble right around the corner. You can't get people to connect with it. And they'll say, well, you know, why are you saying this? Why aren't we hearing this from other places? And you are. You're just not, you're not hearing it repetitively. You're not hearing, you know, when you have the president of Iran stand in the UN and at the end of his address pray to Allah to give him the strength to play the role he needs to play to hasten the return of the promised one. When he says that and the world media dismisses it, and it's there on the UN website, call it up on YouTube, it's there, he said it. And you see these things and you think, oh my gosh, people, please pay attention. When you have Condoleezza Rice saying, we are now beginning to see the birth pangs in the Middle East, that's scriptural references. And birth pangs imply that they are going to get stronger and faster. And then there's an event at the end. These are the words of significant individuals. And unfortunately, this country and the media is so worried about ratings. They're worried about money. They're worried about politics. And the truth is lost. And unless people start to wake up and start to really look and start to find, and I'm not saying it's me, you start looking for those people that you believe that you are getting a straight deal, that you understand what that you believe them. If you don't start finding those people and connecting with those people, we're going to have a really difficult time. It's not what people think it is when, you know, it's a bunch of people calling up, a bunch of liberals calling each other up. It's not that at all. The worst word I learned in the media, my first day on the job at CNN, and all of them are like this, is the word ingested. And I said, where is that film, or where's that piece of tape of something that had been taped earlier? And they said, it hasn't been ingested into the system yet. And I said, that's creepy. And what it means is it needs to go into the system. And once it's in the system, then it's available in every way to everyone in the media. What it also implies, however, and I've seen it time and time again, when the medias were operating at such a fast pace, rate of speed, that when you put something in, if there is a flaw, an innocent flaw, if it is wrong, it's been ingested into the machine, and that's the foundation. And if, let's just say, Fox puts something ingested into the machine, and it's Fox, and then somebody else picks it up, and let's say it's Time Magazine, and they repeat that same thing, there are your two sources. And that's wrong. Now everybody builds on top of that. And so it's not like people are intentionally lying. It's just that people, I don't think, have clear enough vision. They look for their enemies inside of our country more than outside of our country. There are too many people that don't have real respect for the divine providence that put this country on the map. And they're just moving at too fast of a speed. And I've said this on the radio show, and my producers didn't understand it about a year ago, and just recently something has happened, and my producer said, I understand a monologue you gave a year ago. And I said, thank you, it's about time. And that monologue was, you are not intentionally, in most cases, you are not intentionally being lied to, but you are being lied to nonetheless. You are not seeing the truth. And it's the truth because of standards and practices. It's not the truth because there are too many people saying, well, that's not exactly it. It's more of this. And so it's a compromised truth. Then you have special interests. Then you have sponsors. Then you have ratings. By the time you get the story, it's packaged. There's very little information left that can really show you the solar flares that will show you where it's headed. They'll just give you this nice little polished piece and present it. And if it's not sexy, they're only going to show it to you that fast and it's done.
Glenn, I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us today. We're out of time. I wish we had more time. I would love to talk with you for another half hour. But thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Glenn Beck, nationally syndicated talk show host. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Funding for Latter-day Profiles was provided by the following.
The BYU-Idaho College of Business and Communication, helping students rise to excellence and distinguish themselves from the crowd. The BYU-Idaho Bookstore, your complete source for all BYUI merchandise and memorabilia. Online at BYUIBookstore.com.
This has been a student-produced presentation of Brigham Young University, Idaho.